Alright guys, Scrappy here, and today I hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. After multiple accusations flying around this past weekend, iLLeY has responded to the rumours around his conduct in the interview, especially after the series they won up against the Carolina Royal Ravens. Lots of controversy understandably after this one. iLLeY gives his explanation on the matter, but also FaZe, another second place in the tournament this past weekend. Their finals record in the CDL era is no doubt abysmal. What's going on with this franchise? How can they possibly turn this around? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Good tweet here from Octane, of course, as you might well expect. This also on Envoy real quick. 6-time champion now, 1-time world champion, 11 finals appearances, 7th in grand final kills in the CDL era. We'll have a look at those stats in the coming minutes as well, because they are kind of fascinating to see how many times FaZe have been in the grand finals and, well, how relatively few times they've actually lifted the trophy. This as well from Insight, like, there's been some talk actually on the watch party we did this past weekends about, okay, who's the best European player? We had Insight on the couch, we had Cammy on the couch briefly discussing these type of topics, and it's really difficult to put into perspective who the best like European players are, because there haven't been that many kind of until the last couple of years, especially with the likes of Insight and CleanX, victories for European players. For a long time there was a debate, well, you know, Bance, Zero, Madcat and Jerd, they won that event at Stage 1 Playoffs 2017, so they were the only like real international LAN European champions, at least on that type of level, for some time. So, you know, they were considered, you know, Zero was probably considered the greatest, really, in European players, but then Bance was also in the finals in Black Ops 3, the World Championship Grand Finals that year on Splice again, so Bance was therefore kind of considered to be the greatest European player ever, but in the last couple of years, HyDra's come into the mix, right, and now he's a world champion and MVP, so, you know, HyDra kind of has to be the greatest European player ever. I don't think there's too much debate to be had on that, based on, you know, the accolades, because let's say you look at Crim, Formal, and some of these other guys mentioned, you can look up, you know, they've got so many tournaments played, so many championships won, that coming up with distinctions in terms of accolades and success is quite easy, whereas for European players with less championships, it becomes more challenging. But I guess the question has really been, have the likes of Insight and CleanX overtaken, you know, Jerd and, you know, Zero and Bant and these type of guys? And I think that after a performance like this from Insight, there's no doubt really that Insight's the best UK player of all time. I think that that's a valid statement to make. He's now had his second ever 1.40 KD in the finals, joining a select few players that have actually ever achieved that on multiple different occasions. So yeah, Insight might be the best UK player ever. It's always interesting to say this. I wonder what would have happened if Swanee had not retired so soon, but yeah, definitely good to see that Toronto, this interesting international team when it was first formed, having a lot of success and really setting the benchmark right now for what is possible for a team in the Call of Duty League, and other teams will need to try and get close to that, or probably just hope that Toronto regress, because it's going to take a tall task to beat the Toronto that turned up this most recent weekend. FaZe got close, and FaZe always tend to get close. They've never really been like slammed in a finals. I know that this one didn't look especially close, but at least the maps were pretty competitive, right? Like FaZe took them all the way in general. In some of the hard points, the search and destroys of course weren't especially close, but another second place for Atlanta FaZe. Okay, 75 CDL points, $90,000 in prize earnings, but what is going on for this team again, right? They make the finals and they fall short yet again. Of course, Drazah comes in, GG's OpTic and Toronto placed second, had so many winnable situations that I'm excited to work on for Major 2. And again, it's a question, right? Because there's been many events we've seen over the last couple of years where FaZe make the finals and they lose to a team that's like, well, you know, that team did play better, right? They might lose to a New York or they might lose to Toronto, but there's also been occasions like when they lost to Los Angeles Gorillas, Major 2 in Vanguard. It's like, how is that even possible? And sure, they had Spart and the Cheese Gun, the, you know, the Volk or whatever, but still, it was series like that that do make you think, is there something going on with FaZe in these final situations? I do think what hurts them against teams like Toronto is their communication. If you listen to their comms, they're nowhere near as good as Ultras, to be honest. Obviously, their gun skill is impeccable. Their pure ability is like absolutely undeniable. But there are weaknesses for FaZe. Toronto have very few, if any, weaknesses at all, whereas FaZe do have weaknesses in terms of, I would say, their communication. And it's always kind of been this way, right? I mean, you listen to Cellium in his comms when he's calling out people to do one shot, all this type of stuff. And I wouldn't say they're anywhere near as good as Toronto Ultras are, which is, and they're probably not as good as OpTics are, to be honest. And I think they're certainly not as good as Thieves were in previous seasons. So that is a weakness. And when it comes to, grand finals of tournaments where the pressure is really on and you're playing, generally speaking, teams with great comms, I do think that affects these guys. That might not be the only thing why these guys tend to be struggling in finals, but I do think it's one of them, and as FaZe say, just got PTSD from COD Vanguard, because let's not forget, they came off a dominant season in Cold War where they won 4 out of 6 events with Arceties on the team. They ran it back and made, 4 grand finals next year, lost all of those finals, so, they definitely don't want to reminisce too much about Call of Duty Vanguard, but they've started off this season in a similar way, undefeated all the way until they get to the tournament, they get to the latter half of the tournament, they lose a couple of series to Toronto, and, they're second place again. So for a team that does have on paper the best trio ever in Simp, aBeZy and Cellium, their Championship Sunday record is pretty woeful. I mean, they're 21-20 all-time record on Championship Sunday, which is about even for Championship Sunday games. But if you look at the finals record, they're 7-12, 7 grand finals victories. And you've got to mention, first off, obviously, that's a lot of grand finals. That's way more grand finals than, any other team has achieved. But that's a lot of losses in grand finals, right? The fact that aBeZy has tied JCap now for the most ever grand finals losses at 14, when Crimsix, who had 50 grand finals appearances, didn't even have that many losses in the first place, is is kind of incredible. And aBeZy probably will take that record at some point whenever there's another second place. So, obviously FaZe fans have to weigh this up both ways, because it's satisfying to make Championship Sunday, but I know that lots of FaZe fans, they're buzzing going into Championship Sunday, but then they realise, hang on a second, we're back on Sunday again, and just don't tend to deliver. Cellium has been great this season, Simp has been incredible, even Drazah is on here as well in terms of top 10 KDs of the tournament. Attach, of course, also up here number 3, but didn't play too many series, and then aBeZy is somewhat off the list here. But, just comparing some of the guys on FaZe to some of the guys on Toronto, because, you look at that team, Scrappy is a different level of character maybe to what Drazah is, and I think this is the question that I'd have as to whether that trio of Simp, aBeZy and Cellium, for how good they are, and even there's arguments there about how impactful aBeZy has been and some of these other questions at the moment compared to, let's say, how Toronto played this last weekend. But there's also talk about, come a Championship Sunday, come a big series, is their energy going to be quite in the right spot for it? Like, they are the most talented team, but, it's similar trends going around again, and maybe you can even argue that's not the case, right, with, how good Ultra are from a talent perspective, but, it's tough to argue that FaZe aren't the most talented when you look at the team from top to bottom. Obviously, OpTic are in that conversation as well, and New Yorker can't be too far behind, but it's another second place, and it's only the first event of the season, but it's definitely something that needs to be kept an eye on, because it's plausible that, especially with the way that Toronto are looking, and look, OpTic have been beaten by FaZe so far, but if it was a grand finals, who knows what would happen there, right? Because we've seen that before, let's say, start of Vanguard. Now, we've also got to address, though, the, some reaction to this whole iLLeY situation this weekend. If you guys didn't see, there was especially an interview that I believe was after the series versus the Ravens that they eventually won, where, shall we say, it was a difficult interview to watch here with iLLeY, and there was some comparison here between iLLeY's interviews when he was on OpTic, back in the day, when he was speaking to Blaze and, communicating effectively in front of the crowd and all these type of things, to the interview that we saw this past weekend. And obviously there was lots of discussion on the timeline as to, what's going on with iLLeY, is this guy okay, and exactly why, as far as I'm concerned, the team allowed him to go out and do this interview, because I don't believe it was for the best, really, for all parties. But look, as a result of it, I think the general feeling in the community was a matter of concern for iLLeY. Whatever was going on with iLLeY here, it doesn't seem good. And as I mentioned before, if he got, pulled over at the light, said he was like this and was, having trouble really communicating and holding eye contact, I doubt they would let him just drive off into the night. And I feel like the main reason why this situation is worth addressing is because, whatever was going on with iLLeY, I think it's a point of concern for the community, because, whatever substances people were implying that he was using are not good substances in the longer term. And look, whether that was the case for iLLeY or not, it's definitely been the case for players in the past. Even Hook talked about his struggles with this, that it was affecting him substantially when he was, using some of this stuff back in the day. And, you know, once he got off it, he was just so much cleaner, so much better. He was just enjoying life way more than he was previously, and it was having really negative effects on his health. So that was the concern here, right, to try and make sure iLLeY's okay. So iLLeY actually comes out in response to this, and I don't know whether you guys think this is a wise response or not, whether he should have said anything. Is it better to say anything or not to say anything? Is it better to do a tweet or not to say anything at all? I'm not really sure whether, like, you know, maybe Surge probably weren't going to ever come out and say anything, and the league certainly wasn't going to do so unless there was, you know, something found, I guess, in whatever tests they may or may not do. But as iLLeY says, you guys are comedy. I was on caffeine and the fans were screaming. So I guess he's kind of saying, like, okay, a lot of caffeine, presumably if it was caffeine, an obscenely high dosage, and you know, the fans were screaming, so I guess, you know, nerves up on the stage and stuff like that. But it did feel like a little bit of a different situation to what we had seen with iLLeY, well, a couple of years prior when he did, you know, some very good interviews with certain individuals. So I just think the general feeling of the community here is just to try and hope that iLLeY is okay, right, and to get this situation resolved, whatever exactly was going on this weekend. Because especially given the fact that you've got Seattle Surge, Hook is on that team, he's talked openly in the past about, you know, abuse of these substances over the last several years. So, well, Surge should know full well what the situation could be here, and in order to make sure that's not the case, I'm sure Rambo, well, he's not an idiot either, right? Like, I think Rambo probably knows what is going on. We don't know fully. We only see the consequences publicly. We don't know what the circumstances are behind the scenes. But I think we can only hope that the next time iLLeY is playing a match and we have a look at the player cam, there's, you know, there's nothing particularly untoward going on, because that would, yeah, not be a good sign for what's potentially happening behind the scenes at Surge right now. And I'm still mind-blown they let him do that interview, right? Like, surely one of his teammates could have taken that instead. But, yeah, just a couple of things to mention before we close out the video. I did promise you guys this updated grand finals kills here from Brian Stats in the CDL era. I mean, as you might expect, aBeZy, Simp and Cell are miles ahead in terms of pure kill numbers. Thieves, who was on FaZe for some time, he is number 4. Then Shotzzy, who's made lots of finals in the CDL era. Priestahh, Envoy, Hook, CleanX. But Crim is still here, which is kind of incredible. Obviously, his CDL era wasn't known for being as dominant as his pre-CDL era, but still, the fact that Crim's still here at number 9, having been out of the league for a year and a bit now, is still pretty impressive. So very much interested your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.